Back for another episode of the Paper Plate Show with Stegall and Sanchez. And our first guest is none other than Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press, baby.
We thought it was perfect time. Lots going on in Bomberville, coming off a win in Ottawa, but an interesting win with a lot of conversation, controversy, and questions, starting with your head coach, Mike O'Shea. How are things? Welcome, first of all.
Welcome.
Thanks for joining us. And how are things in Winnipeg?
First of all, it's a pleasure to be on here with you guys. I love the show. I love what you guys chop up with every week. So to be part of that's an absolute pleasure. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the 5-4 Winnipeg Blue Bombers, guys, right? This is a team that has high expectations. The fan base has high expectations. Why wouldn't you after going to 5 straight Grey Cups? But the situation currently as it stands today, I'd love to check the heartbeats of this fan base every single game this year, right? Because these games are going down to the wire. A lot of it is, the Bombers shooting themselves in the foot on certain occasions, and it's led to these wacky finishes. Some have ended up on the Bombers' side, some have ended up in losses. So it's been this back and forth kind of year. And whether it's talking to fans out in public or friends who are big supporters of the team, or it's even players in the locker room, I hear this exact same thing. Things just feel different this year. And I think that sums things up perfectly. And why I would, I'll add to that is that, it's different this year because I'll remind viewers, the Bombers were 2-6, 8 games into last season, but there was a lot more optimism because the Bombers were competing. They were losing close games, and there was real growing pains early on from some key guys, Jamarcus Hardrick being one of them, that group of guys that left, so Jackson Jeffco being another. So they lost a lot of leaders in the room. So it was going to take time to get things going. And Mike O'Shea, head coach, said at the beginning of that year, things are going to be different, but they're going to come around. That's exactly what happened that season. This season, it's back and forth. We thought there was going to be progress from last year to this year. That hasn't been the case, even if the record does look better at this time of the year.
So you saying there are people who are saying it's not the same. Is this coming from players, fans, coaches? Where is this coming from?
Players. I mean, some of the more veteran players. I won't out anyone as far as, and I don't think that message is a wild one, is suggesting that things are bad. It's just different, right? I mean, you look at the team this year. I mentioned before, you lost guys like Jackson Jeffco. You lost guys like Jamarcus Hardrick, a guy who brought a lot of personality to the team, who made every day enjoyable, right? And then you look at this last season, Adam Bighill, Brandon Alexander. You guys know what it is, and when it comes to defenses, the middle matters the most. So there's new guys in those places. So there's new leadership roles here. There's communication issues. So there's a lot. While there's certainly more moving parts, I think there's a lot more issues with the team as far as a communication thing, as far as relaying that camaraderie and having that. So it's just, there's different people in the stadium or in the locker room, and there's different even different coaches. Buck Pierce leaving, right? So the offense is now with Jason Hogan. So it's just all these different things, and things aren't working out. I think there's an expectation amongst the players that they're going to get victories, that even if they do start slow, they're going to end up winning. And I just don't think that confidence is there. And again, it's part of personnel. It's part of that difference and that change, the turnover, if you will, that we've seen the last, not just one season, but 2.
Jeff, I want to go right to the decision to kick the field goal. Sergio Castillo was 57 yards at the end of the Ottawa game. And then more importantly for me, and I think what a lot of folks that I've talked to or been around are talking about, is Mike O'Shea's maybe inability to reflect, to question it. That's really what I want to go to. What's kind of been your guys' takes, and what's been the feeling around there? Because that kind of took us all for a little bit of a loop.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off by saying I think Mike didn't like his reaction post-game to some of the questions that we've been asking him week after week. In fact, he rarely does this, but he said after that win to Ottawa felt like a loss in some ways, but that win against the Red Blacks, hey guys, why are we focusing on the negative? We won, right? He never really says that, but you could feel he was a little frustrated with, I think, the added questions that are coming to some of his questionable play calls. And before we even get into the field goal and the other plays here that have been questioned, not just this year, but dating back years, is you got to know who Mike O'Shea is. I'm going to start by saying Mike O'Shea is one of the greatest guys I've had a chance to meet in this career. He's one of the nicest guys. He's the kind of guy that if you went out for a beer with him, you would not be talking football. He's the last thing that he'd want to be talking about. In fact, all he would want to talk about is you. And he'd find something you were passionate about, something you were interested in, and then he would spend that entire time he was with you asking about whatever that was. That's just who he is. I've seen that on full display when we've gone up north to Indigenous communities. I've seen that in the community here. So I'm going to start off by that. However, and this isn't a huge but, he's still a great dude. He is the most stubborn individual I have ever met in my sports career that has now extended beyond a decade. He just doesn't, and it's a few different things. It's not just this simple, he doesn't care what anybody else has to say. It's his way or the highway approach. And that's the way it might be taken if you found yourself as maybe one of the opposing city's writers and we're in for scrums and you're like, wow, he really doesn't want to take accountability here. It's much deeper than that. This is a guy who puts the time in, the work in. There is no detail too small for Mike O'Shea, and all he cares about is winning. So if you even look at when he first started coaching, when he first got on and had to face the media every single day, it was cringy, man. I felt for him because it was just, you knew he wasn't comfortable. And the attitude that he had was media wasn't helping us win. So why should I share anything with them? Why should I be part of this if it's not going to lead to winning? That has softened over the years, guys, but the mantra remains. He's not going to stand in front of media and tell you that what he did on the field was the wrong call. He doesn't see any value in it. And not only does he not see any value in it, he doesn't see it is the wrong decision, because in that moment, whether you want to talk, and we'll get into some of these plays, the field goal, the game before against Toronto where they threw when they were up by 6 points, in close and got intercepted. He says that those decisions are prepared, that they go through these different scenarios, and they've gone through various scenarios over his 12 years of coaching, and they talk about these things so that when he makes these decisions, all the data points that are running through his head lead to the best decision in that moment for his team. And so that's the attitude he takes in. But when you look at the plays like the field goal, you look at that play and you go, well, you called a short yardage play the play before that, thinking, you needed about 2.5 yards, thinking you would do that again to kind of ice the game. And then you go back to this kick. Everybody knows, everybody who covers this league, you don't have to be a pro football player. You don't have to know the ins and outs of the CFL to understand one of the, if not the most vulnerable position you can find yourself in is if you miss a long field goal, miss any field goal, but particularly a long field goal. And you can say that to Mike. You know what he'll tell you? Sergio Castillo was perfect beyond 50 this year. He set a new record last season for the most kicks, 50 and beyond. So the way he's thinking is that Sergio Castillo is going to make that kick. They're going to walk off the field, and they're not going to have these conversations. But since he missed it, he doesn't care to have them, and he doesn't believe that he needs to explain that to you. And the final thing I'll say, just so you had a full idea of him, is that he wants to empower players to do greatness. So that's what he was doing with Sergio Castillo. That's what he's done in other decisions, and that is who Mike O'Shea is as a coach and arguably a human.
Before let me jump in because you're gonna defend Mike O'Shea, Milt. So I want to jump in before you do, and I want to. I know already. So I want to get into a couple things I saw with the press conference that I want to touch on. What you said, okay? And I wrote these things down, okay? To your point, he said that when asked about the decision,
it's way harder to punt that distance than it is to kick the field goal that distance. I think there's a reason why they always try the field goal instead of punt for the single.
I'm not saying about the single, but just even to bury them within the 15.
Yeah, you could do that.
So the field goal was an immediate decision, easy decision?
Pretty easy decision.
Okay.
His comment was Sergio's good from that distance. And when asked about why he decided to kick, Sergio's good from that distance. And then he repeated that comment. Sergio's good from that distance. Not discussing the situation. Sure, Sergio is good from that distance in the first quarter of a 3-3 ball game against Nathan Rourke, not against a backup quarterback with a minute left in the game and the score what it was, up by 7. So that's the part that was concerning to me. Secondly, when we look at this from a macro standpoint here, okay, and I can talk to 100 people and I've talked to a lot, but let's say I talked to 100 people and polled them, respected football people that understand the CFL, people that either players, coaches, people that understand this league. And I would say 80 of them would say, definitely, no question, at least 80 of them would say, I would have punted the ball. I would not have kicked the field goal. Let's say this. I would have not kicked a field goal in that situation. So the fact that
let me interrupt you just real quick, Chaz. How many of them have gone to 5 straight Grey Cups? Continue. Those folks you asked, how many of them have gone to 5 straight Grey Cups?
Hey, get him back, Chezzy.
Continue.
Let him know that it was Dustin
Continue.
Crum, not Drew Brown in the game, that his defense has been the unit that matters the most to their success this year, and I'm on your side. But I agree, and I think that's the point there, Milt. 5 straight Grey Cups.
You're right, and I think to Milt's point, and Milt, you're right, and that's the problem. The problem is Mike O'Shea doesn't feel like he has to give the right answer, or he doesn't even. He's not even granting us the satisfaction of telling us why, or that he might have second guessed it, because he's been to 5 straight Grey Cups. And I think that is probably the problem. Actually, I know that's the problem. Jeff's saying that it's been like that since day one. So maybe maybe it's always been that way. But back to what I was saying is that if you ask those people, 80 out of 100, probably minimum, would say they would have not kicked the field goal in that spot. If I'm a player in that locker room, I'm concerned that my coach, because now you've lost 3 straight Grey Cups, and this is not a touch on the greatness of what they've done over the last 5 years, because you can't dispute it. And so he's obviously a great coach. But if you've lost 3 biggest games of the year 3 times in a row, and there's obviously been some things you have not done correctly. So for those reasons, you at least would have to look back, reflect. He was unreflective. He was stubborn, rigid. You have to look at the situation in this game and at least say, we got away with one there. I would, looking back on it, if I'm Matt O'Shea, say, I'm looking back on it, maybe I would consider punting in that situation. Maybe I would let Sergio kick it, but it's definitely a decision that I would think about. He's defiantly saying, and I would say arrogantly saying, nope, would do it again, and almost being combative with the reporters asking the question. When, again, 90%, I'll move it up to 90 now, % of people that know this game would not have made the same decision. But he's not even giving it a second. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I mean, you made the point. This man has gone to 5 straight Grey Cups. He's not going to change his approach, his mindset based on one play. When you've had the success he's had, why would you change up? Why would you change up? I know what you're talking about. It's a situation.
I'm not asking him to change his mindset and his approach on how he treats people or how he conducts his practice schedule. I'm asking him, and I'm a player in his locker room, I'm asking him to have situational awareness. And if I'm wrong, I'm asking him to say, you know what? I might, you might be right. Maybe I look back at it and I think about it for a minute. That's all I'm asking. He doesn't even have to say that it's wrong decision. At least give it, look back and say, you know what? It is a tough decision. But to say it's not a decision at all, and then the arrogance to double down on it, and almost, he came off pretty arrogant. You were there, Jeff. I mean, you've been around this.
This is the thing you're not alone, Chezzy. There's a lot of people who have covered Mike for a long time that he rubs the wrong way. There's people who come in from out of town who question what's going on here. Do you have to deal with this every day? Like I said, I appreciate dealing with Mike O'Shea every day. And I've told this to a lot of people. He's made me a better reporter. He's made me prepared. He's made me show up with the right questions. He will razor in on one word. And I am a wordy guy when it comes to asking questions. He'll zoom in on one word and he'll be like, I wouldn't say that word, or I wouldn't do it, completely ignoring the question. This is the reality of Mike. He's not changing because what he does has got him there. Yes, he hasn't had the victories the last 3 years. It's tough to win a championship. It's tough to get to a Grey Cup. And those conversations about needing to change things are happening in the front offices here, right? They are saying something's broken, something isn't working. But Mike is like that. That's what he's got here on those morals. He's got there on those rules. And I'd add loyalty to it as another thing, right? Loyalty is something that has worked for him. And it's also something that has killed his opportunities, right? His loyalty to certain players, his loyalty, to certain coaches and staffs, his loyalty to internal, right? His lack of trust extends to having the impossible task of hiring people, right? Like he has it just sits with them. And this is a guy who had to go to Mark Leggio's house to cut him. A kicker. That's how difficult it is for Mike. This is a guy who he hasn't filed his retirement papers. And anybody who wants to go back into history, he was forced off the field, right? He was in a press conference that he had no say in, had no interest in being at. So that's just who he is. So these things that come back and bite him in the butt have also been his bread and butter in some of his brightest moments. And when he asks players to do certain things on a week-to-week basis, to do more than the 4.5 hours that we keep hearing about with the CBA and required time, when he asks them to run through a wall for him, and all of them will, he needs to back it up by believing in the people who have got him there. So to him, and I believe this wholeheartedly, it's not even about the winning and losing. It's about staying true to who he is. And he trusts that if he does that, more often than not, he'll find himself on the right side of things.
And it's worked for him. It's worked for him. It's worked.
I see you bobbing your head.
But I think there's an issue here. Because here's the thing. That's why he's been able to be here for 12 years, that his voice hasn't gotten old. But to your point, Chezzy, I think there is potential for a divide in the locker room. I think players are looking at some of these decisions, and it's not one every year. For this year, it seems to be week after week after week. And they're wondering what's going on here, right? There's a certain culture in Winnipeg. And it's not the patients are running the asylum. It is a family feel here. Guys have been here for a long time. A lot of guys have been here throughout the dynasty. They're not afraid to share their opinion. They don't want to air their dirty laundry, but they do have strong opinions. Players had strong opinions about Buck when he was here, right? A guy who was heralded as being among, if not the best OC, in the league at that, during his years here, right? And wanting to throw the ball more, whether that's Zach Collaros wanting something like that or Brady wanting to run the ball more, right? None of those things are secrets. They were all aired out at different stages last season, particularly after the Grey Cup, where they abandoned their most outstanding player, right? That's what empowering players means to Mike O'Shea, is giving every guy an opportunity to be a leader. Not everyone needs to be the raw guy, but everybody feels like they're a piece of it. When you feel like you're truly a piece of it, it matters to you. You question things. So there's no doubt in my mind that there's a lot of questions swirling in that locker room. I'm not saying there's lost confidence and stuff like that, but people are wondering what's going on here. And I think it would get worse if we see more of them.
Milt, so go ahead, Milt, because you had strong feelings. You were agreeing with Jeff, and I do want to say this. I don't think it's a negative. I do respect the way that they've ran the organization over the last 5 years. How could you not? I mean, it's loyalty. It's you talked about players having a say and allowing them to they run things, and it's trust in those guys and the loyalty. But Milt, my point with this is not sitting here looking at how they run things and what kind of person that Mike O'Shea is and how loyal he is and what a great teammate he is. I'm talking about decisions in pro football which are difficult, and I can't make decisions on how I run my quarterback or decisions I make in a game through loyalty, and that's not the way it works. You do by the best way. You're giving your best chance to win a football game.
You mentioned something earlier, Chaz, situational awareness. When you talking about that last field goal, maybe his situational awareness was based on the fact that there's been, I think, 5 field goals over 60 yards attempted in the CFL, and 3 of them have been made by Castillo. So maybe his situational awareness was based on he felt good about his field goal kicker going out there and making this. It
But
had
Milt,
nothing to do with
that's
Crum being in
excusable.
there.
That's
Huh?
excusable, the kick. The kick's excusable. Let's go back 2 weeks, okay? It's under 2 minutes left in the game. The Bombers are leading by 6 points. They have Chris Strevler as their quarterback, and they are
Time out before you finish. Did
okay.
they win this game?
No. Oh, yes, they did win this game.
There we go. Okay,
Okay,
finish.
yeah,
So
no, they
finish.
did
They
win
won
this
the
game,
game,
but
though.
we're
Finish.
talking
Okay.
about situational football, okay? And I have a hard
But
time
they
thinking,
did win the game, though, right?
They won the game. They won
right?
the game. They
And
won the
that's
game.
all that
Yeah,
matters.
for
But
sure.
finish up. Continue.
I'll be sure to make that logic on games where the Bombers have lost.
Yeah,
I'll make sure to
that's
check
all that matters.
Marquez.
That's all that matters to Milt is who wins or loses.
But this is the
we
point
also
of
shut the show
situational
down because
football.
all
This is one
he's
of the
gonna lose.
examples, and there's other. There's the Zach Collaros during the Grey Cup last year with the cut. There's the Justin Medlock in the West semifinal in 2016 when they pulled out a tee for a 62-yard kick that Medlock hadn't used since he was in college. But going back just a few weeks ago, up 6 points, there was like 2 minutes left on the clock. I get there's a lot of time in football, especially in the CFL in those dying minutes. However, they could have ran twice, burnt the clock, kicked the field goal, trusted Castillo to make it a 9-point game with about a minute remaining, and they decided to throw the ball in the end zone and got picked off. Yes, they won the game. The Bombers' defense, the same defense that you could argue Mike turned his back on in Ottawa last week, came up massive, stopped them, and prevented them from losing that game. But it never should have got to that point. And I have a hard time thinking even you on that side, even if you were the receiver who they were targeting in the end zone, wouldn't have seen that as a bizarre play call given the situation and given how important it was after losing to Toronto the week before to get that victory. It made zero sense to me to throw that ball, and to justify it after the game wasn't a guy who was leaning on loyalty and empowering players, whatever. It was a stupid call on a guy who couldn't take accountability for it.
Well, first of all, if I would have been the receiver, it wouldn't have been an interception to begin
There
with.
you
That's
go.
first of all. But second of all, as a receiver, I would have been like, well, my coach believes in me. I would love that. I would love to have that opportunity to have a coach that believes in me.
That's what Chris Strevler said post game.
Yes, those players love that. And I know you're saying there's some strife, there may be some separation in that locker room. But when you have a coach that believes in you like that, even if I personally think it's the wrong decision, my coach believes in me, I'm going to try to go out there and do whatever I can in my power to make it happen.
There's no believe in you, because with every decision, there's someone he's believing in or he's not believing in. Because when you decide you're not believing in your defense when you decide to throw the ball in the end, chuck it in the end zone and get picked off. You're not believing in your punter when you decide to kick a field goal. You're not believing in your defense when you decide to kick a field goal. So there's not believing in it. There's two sides to it.
That's not necessarily true, Chaz. You're just trying to put your team in the best situation. That's not necessarily true. He felt if he made that field goal, they would have been up by 9 points, and his defense would have been in a better situation. That doesn't mean he doesn't believe in his defense necessarily. I don't believe that. That's not always the case.
Well, and Mike will tell you that's not the case. And I never put it as a hierarchy
case,
of like caring about different positions, right? But I asked Mike even yesterday about, do you have gut feeling, right? And he took the word gut and he waxed on about how there's no such thing as a gut feeling. A gut feeling is when you have all the work done, when you have all the small details done, and then you get to an emotion where you agree with it. That's your gut. That's the calculation. So that's the level in which Mike O'Shea breaks down decision making. And so in that way, whether you want to look at the 5 Grey Cups, it's not this mad scientist who's just tossing out different elixirs to create some kind of great solution. This is a guy who is already he finds it tried and true, and he's prepared and ready post game to defend any decision he and his staff make.
We can end this part of the conversation on that. I think I do want to be clear that it's all I'm asking for on from my end is I would personally like, if I'm in that locker room or I'm a fan of the Bombers or whatever it is, when I'm looking at a coach, I want someone that can look at a mistake or it's a mistake, but you look at a mistake, look at a decision and reflect on it and say, oh, you know what? I could look at it and maybe here's what I could do next time. Here's what happened this time. And that's part of the growing process in every coach and everything. And when I see someone consistently coming up and defending something not willing to even consider it, almost being defensive. I see a little bit of an arrogance there. And I don't think that's serving that locker room. I think it's the decisions need to be made individually, and I think that there's got to be thought that goes into every decision you make. I think with both you guys make good points. I did want to ask you one more thing, Jeff, and that's about Jason Hogan. You mentioned Jason Hogan, and there has been some, that was kind of a surprise hiring, from the history of what Jason Hogan has, how long he's been around. Maybe that was a bit of a surprise hiring with who was out there. Is that something that's swirled around Winnipeg a little bit as well, the decision to make Jason Hogan the OC? And that goes back again to Mike O'Shea and the loyalty of if he doesn't hire within, it's looked upon as maybe not being loyal.
I think it's just an added element of criticism, right? Like, I think it doesn't matter if it's Buck Pierce running the offense, if it's Jason Hogan, right? If you're not getting the job done, this fan base is going to be critical. So people are critical of the Bombers right now. I mean, people have called for Mike O'Shea's head, right? Like, and it's also, you look at the beginning of the season, Jason Hogan was, he was up for Man of the Year in Manitoba after those back-to-back wins against BC Lions. It was like, Buck Pierce who, right? He was the new kid in town, the best friend and mentor to Brady Oliveira, and has certainly come crashing down to earth here since then. But I think certainly the decision to hire or to promote Jason Hogan as OC wasn't surprising because, as I mentioned before, Mike's just incredibly loyal. Like he was looking for every excuse to go in-house, and he probably even begrudged the necessity of having outside interviews because he doesn't want to disappoint people. And the other thing is he doesn't trust easily. Right? He doesn't trust easily. And I think a good, maybe a tie-off story here is a lot of people ask, well, why is Dylan Mitchell not in the lineup? Like, what happened to Dylan Mitchell? Like, why isn't, this is their prize free agent that they signed out of Edmonton and brought in and gave a big bonus to and had a press conference in Winnipeg over the winter. They don't do that for a lot of people. But he showed up to training camp out of shape and not ready to go. You know who else did that, guys? Future Hall of Famer Andrew Harris. And he was gone the next season. Gone. Yep. And so Dylan Mitchell shows up out of shape. That's the loyalty that works against you and the trust. Right. If he doesn't have your trust, you think he was letting Dylan Mitchell show up out of shape and get into the lineup anytime soon? He let him rot on the one game and then over to the practice roster, then got back in because anybody else who had any ideas of showing up to camp out of shape, whether you're a new guy or a returning veteran, that's what it's going to look like. That's the Met. He doesn't care. And so that loyalty, that focus on him, that's really what, that's what it comes through to here. So like, I think when you look at Jason Hogan's hiring, it's a guy that was probably the best guy in-house for him. He didn't want to bring someone. He ended up bringing Jarius Jackson, who I think is a great mentor for a guy like Jason Hogan. Could easily make the argument he should probably have the position, right? So I do think there's been some growing pains here. I do think there's a little bit of a feeling of like in over his head. But guys, anyone who gets to this situation for the first time is going to feel those feelings and needs to be given an opportunity, needs to be given that confidence to do the job well. We've seen that here. We saw it with Jordan Younger on defense. We just got to wait to see it for Jason Hogan. But before that, he was a well-respected guy, obviously with the run game. But I think when you look at that decision, it might seem unorthodox and they probably could have got more qualified players. But this is a guy who knows the way Mike does business, is not going to speak out against the team, and is going to be a guy who puts in the work. And all those things usually work out in your favor. So we're just kind of waiting for the results for Jason Hogan because it's not an issue of work ethic, that's for sure.
Jeff Hamilton, appreciate your time. You guys can check out Jeff, CFL 110. Tuesdays.
Tuesdays. Usually it was today at 10, but it's usually at 3:15. So look for it every Tuesday afternoon on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Wherever you find this great podcast, you can search CFL 110 after you're done listening to this one.
Appreciate you coming on.
One of the sharper guys and our guy. Appreciate you coming on and chopping up, Jeff.
Winnipeg's finest, baby. Winnipeg's finest.
Saskatchewan Rough Riders. They are the best team in the CFL, and it's not even close. They're not just winning, they're dominating. And I think they're dominating on both sides of the ball, and that's what we want to get into. I'll let you get into it first, talk about the defense, and I'll I'll talk about a little bit about the offense, but why are they dominating? Why have they been so good on their
Yeah.
defense, Chad?
Yeah, look, coming into the game against Hamilton, I thought two really good offenses. I thought the key was that they couldn't run the ball, or Hamilton wasn't great at running the ball, and Sask had a run game. But I didn't realize that the key was really this defensive line. I mean, Saskatchewan, they are dominant, completely dominant. They have a good back end, but it all starts up front. And I was talking to another coach in the league, and they were talking about just the depth of who they roll through. They're dressing 8 defensive linemen and just rolling guys through, and they are getting after it. And that was the difference. I mean, you have the interior guy. Here's where it lies. You have the interior guys with Micah Johnson and Mike Rose, 2 guys who have been dominant interior guys for a long time. Then you have a healthy Shane Ray, who's a speed guy off the edge. I mean, that and then just the rotation of guys they have flying through there. Just you saw it. Hamilton had no answer. And then on the back end, when they did have good protection, because there were times that we watched the game on a panel together, and we were talking about it. Bo's holding the ball. He was holding the ball a long time. Well, why is he holding the ball? Because that back end, Sales and Tavon Campbell has been a pleasant surprise. I didn't know, how his transition would be back from the NFL. I mean, obviously, Roland Milligan. They're playing excellent football back there. So just the combination of that front, which everybody thinks is the best front for really front 8 in the league. I'm talking about their defensive line, and then that back end, the combination just made them difficult to deal with offensively. I know, you saw some things you liked, but defensively, this team is doing everything they need to do.
Yeah, I know Trevor Harris is not only the most important person on offense, but the most important person on that team. But Jamarcus Hardrick has brought so much to that team, to that offensive line, that really shored up that offense. But I want to touch on something else. And coming into this season, we knew Trevor Harris was going to be established, but I was concerned about this receiving core. I was concerned because they had some injuries. 3 of their 4 top receivers from last year have played a total of 4 games, and that's Emulis has played 4 games. Schaefer Baker, who was their 3rd leading receiver, hadn't stepped on the field. Sean Bain hadn't stepped on the field. Sean Bain Jr. So I got to give some love to their scouting department, to Jeremy O'Day, because they got a couple of second-year guys who are balling out. Robustelli, you got Dante Myers, and, of course, you got Keyshawn Johnson. Those 3 guys combined last year had 82 catches for over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. And already this year, they have 115 catches, almost 1,700 yards, and 10 touchdowns. That's credit to that scouting department, allowing those guys to step in and ball out. So now, if I'm Schaefer Baker, if I'm Bain, I'm like, man, I'm gonna get my job back, because these guys are doing great. And when you're 8-1, you don't want to mess up that chemistry you have. Trevor Harris has found his big play guys. Those guys are tied for BC as far as big plays, receiving goals, 30-yard completions. They have 19. They have that chemistry now. They don't want to mess that up. The one department on this team that's struggling is their kicking game. Yeah. That needs to be corrected. And the way I would do that is, and you play under this guy, Don Matthews, bringing some players in to challenge him. I'm going to put him right in front of him. They cannot continue doing that. I'm going to put him right in front of Brett Lawler and said, we're going to have a kickoff. If you can't beat this guy, I'm going to give them an opportunity to play in the game. Yes, we're 8-1, but we need to keep getting better, and our kicking game needs to get better.
So you talked to the scouting department. When we were give shout out to Kyle Carson, who assistant GM. We were just in DC last week at the Washington Commanders practice. Kyle Carson was there, the assistant GM for the Riders. Then went to Baltimore 2 days later, and guess who was there on the sideline? Kyle Carson, assistant GM for the Riders. So obviously putting in the work, because as you see, and it doesn't stop, because they have a loaded roster, and he's still grinding down south, finding guys. That's the life. You're always looking ahead and moving. So shout out to your point, Jeremy O'Day and Kyle Carson, also Paul Jones, a part of that department, long time guy, well respected for finding talent in this league. those
Paul Jones
receivers.
found the greatest receiver in CFL history. I won't say who his name is, but who'd you
He
say?
found Paul Jones, found G-Roy, found Arlen Bruce, G-Roy Simon. Did Paul Jones found you?
He found me after my 3 years with the Bengals. I signed with Green Bay, and he was at that training camp, and I got released. I was on the neg. He put me on the neg list, and Kyle Murphy, who was the coach at the time, he was like, I needed some speed, and I wasn't the fastest guy. And Paul was like, believe me, this guy can play with. And Kyle didn't want to. He didn't want to put me on the field because I wasn't a 4.5, 4.3 guy.
Yeah.
But the rest is history, as they say. Rest is history.
You're not a 4.5 guy. I'm not buying. I covered you. I'm not buying. You're not a 4.5 guy.
I'm faster than the guy chasing me. That's all I'm concerned with.
Look. Just to shore up this Riders. We're talking about a team right now. They're 8-1. They're going to Calgary this week. This is going to be a good one and a big test. I mean, it seems like Sask gets a test every week. It's like, oh, this is going to be a big test, but it doesn't. They don't seem fazed by these tests. But this is going to be a good one on Saturday. I look forward to that one. That's a 7:00 Eastern start in Calgary. That's going to be a good game.
This is the only team they lost to, and if they win this game and beat Winnipeg the following game, I know they're not looking that far ahead. They would have beaten every single team in the CFL. Every single team they would have beaten them. Calgary's the only team they lost to, so if they can win these next two games, I mean, that goes a long way in shoring up the West. And if they could do that, their path to the Grey Cup is looking pretty good. Yeah,
they have Winnipeg. The Riders have Winnipeg back to back. After this game, it's Winnipeg back to back, and on the other side, this is interesting for Winnipeg and Sask. BC has Toronto, and then BC has a bye, and then they have Ottawa. So a crucial 3-week span here for Winnipeg, Sask, and BC. Obviously Calgary as well, but the West in general in 3 weeks. We're going to learn a lot because there's teams that can separate big time, or they can fall off big time depending on what happens the next 3 weeks. Yeah, let's move on. We wanted to talk about.
Can I bring up just one thing? Talk about our poll real quick.
Yeah.
So we do a poll every week,
thank you.
and for this week, it's we talked about which team is the biggest threat to stop the Riders from winning the Grey Cup. 13% was other, 15% Tiger Cats, 30% Stampeders, and 42% Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I wonder where majority of these folks are from who voted on this, but that was the poll we did, and majority of folks think it's the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
The Winnipeg Blue Bombers are the biggest threat to Sask right now?
That's what the poll is saying, baby. That's what they're saying.
I voted Calgary. Who did you vote?
I voted the Hamilton Tiger Cats.
Okay.
Winnipeg, everyone. That's like I voted the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Hamilton Tiger Cats.
Yeah, that'll tell you we appreciate the Stegall influence in our viewership from our Bombers folks, and that's love. But Winnipeg is not. And please go ahead, tell me why. I mean, I guess look, if you look at what's happened over the last 5 years and the dominance of this team, and getting the playoff success, you like it or not, they're making it to the Grey Cup because of playoff success. They might have lost in the game, but they're still getting there. So playoff success.
Right.
So nobody's beat them in the Western Final yet. So if you want to give a reason as to why the Bombers can be your choice, that's it. They have had success in the playoffs, like it or not. But that's definitely wouldn't be my choice at this point. But I understand.
Not right now. Right now.
I understand
not right now.
The angle.
Let's talk about old Chad Kelly.
I'm in the top 32 NFL starting quarterbacks, and I think my resume has spoken for itself.
He says, I'm one of the best 32 quarterbacks, this is paraphrasing, in the world right now, and my resume speaks for itself. That's what injured quarterback for the Toronto Argonauts, Chad Kelly, is saying. My response,
what
planet are you on right now, the fact you're saying that, Chad Kelly? I think you are a good quarterback, and you've done some great things in your career. You were all SEC. You've won a couple of Grey Cups. You've been the the MOP of the CFL. But Sam, you're one of the best 32 quarterbacks in the world. Take me to that planet. Maybe I can grow my hair back on that planet. So I want to get there, buddy.
I
You know
mean,
what? I
yeah,
appreciate his.
yeah.
I appreciate his confidence, though. You got to appreciate that, Chad.
Look, it does sound like there's a bunch of backup quarterbacks in the NFL right now that are being paid a whole lot of money and are have
He's
better.
saying he's one of the best 30, not a backup.
Oh yeah, shoot, yeah, I was
He's saying
saying
I'm
that.
one of
Well,
the best
I think
32, not a
yes,
backup.
yeah. Well, I'm saying that the backup quarterbacks are ahead of him is what I'm saying. So he wouldn't be 32 because the guy at 33 and 34 and 35 are a lot better than he is. But my point, I guess, is you're right. He's saying he's one of the top 32. Is if you're Chad Kelly, he does have, and you'll agree with this because we've talked about it. He does have the skill set. He does have game, and he does have talent. So for him to say, talent wise, he's one of the top 32. I get it. He might be talent wise one of the top 32. That's just probably a stretch, but he might not be way off. The reality though is that the last time that you've been injured the last couple of years, you had some struggles. You played well, but you've also had some struggles at times. And so to say that is probably, again, it's not hurting anything by saying that because he's not saying that he's better than everybody in that he's playing with, or I guess he is, but I would say that he's or maybe he thinks that Trevor, VA, and Nathan are also best 32 in the world.
I don't think he's saying
Anyway,
that.
I
don't think he's saying that.
I don't look. I would say this: if Chad wants to say that, then good on him. Doesn't change anything. He's got to go out and prove it. And I think that the Argos sooner than later would want him to go out there and prove that he is this good. I do one thing that I will say. Guys always do interviews down south with outlets, and
Right.
I don't think that they think, because I heard this got removed or deleted, this post.
Mhm.
I don't think that they think that it's going to get back here, because everyone in the CFL who sees this is probably thinking the same thing. Like, what are you talking about? And for you to promote yourself down there, I get it. Why not? But I think everyone in the CFL looking at this, it's got to be like, what are you talking about? Anyway,
You don't think he thought this was gonna? I mean, the way things move, the internet,
yeah.
how things happen. Like I don't. I think he knew it was gonna get back, and I truly think he feels that way. But now you putting a target on you now. Now you're putting a target on you. So you better when you get your opportunity to play again, you
There we
better kill
go.
it because
There we go.
otherwise folks are going to be bringing this back up, bringing this one back up.
One thing, let's talk real fast before we move on to John Metchie, the John Metchie trade. John Metchie, Canadian John Metchie, as from Alabama, drafted by the Texans, as was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, joining back with his former college teammate at Bama, Devontae Smith. This is exciting because I was a big fan. Obviously, with John being Canadian, I followed him, I've watched him. I love his game. He's a guy who got caught in a bad situation because they had high expectations for him in Houston. He had the cancer scare.
Right.
Missed the season, and then when he missed the season, all of a sudden that Houston receiving core blew up, and they had a ton of talent. Now those guys got injured a bit. Now they're back. They found him disposable and trade him to the Eagles, which is a good spot. But his skill set as a slot guy and as a guy that as a stick mover, I'm a big fan of John Metchie. And with that offense, I think he has a real resurgence in his career, and I can't wait to see him in Philly.
Yeah, it's exciting for him. It was a tough situation for him. Going back to college too. Coming out of college, he tore up his knee in the SEC championship game. Didn't get an opportunity to participate in the combine or work out for anybody. Otherwise, he may have been a first-round draft pick. And then he had the unfortunate illness his first year in Houston, and then didn't get a full opportunity to display his skills. But now he's going to a different situation, and it's not an easy situation they're set at 1 and 2, and I know they like Dotson as their number 3 guy. What's working in his favor, and I hate to bring this up, is A.J. Brown is injured right now, and Devontae Smith is even a little injured right now. So they're going to give him opportunity to display his skills. They have some younger guys behind those 3 guys who they like, but they are younger. They don't have the experience like Metchie. So he's going to get his opportunity. You look at film on him. He's a patient, quick route runner, meaning he's patient in setting up his defender. But when he gets out of his breaks, he's also good with his emphasis step, meaning when he's breaking, he's able to get in and out. He gives that hard emphasis step. He's also a willing blocker. Let's be honest. Most receivers don't like to block. He doesn't mind sticking his nose in there and getting dirty and blocking DBs or even linebackers. So he has those things working in his favor. He has a high football IQ. He just has to get an opportunity. And as I mentioned, he may get it with the Eagles because of those injuries. But when those guys are healthy, I mean, he's the 4th receiver at best, because I know how much they like Brown, Smith, and Dotson. As good as you mentioned, he's playing back with his former teammate, Devontae Smith. They had some great times together in Alabama, so hopefully they can continue that, and he's able to actually have a great career that he didn't have with the Texans.
Let's bring in someone now, Milton. I want to bring in, talking NFL still, our Dave Naylor, fresh from Indianapolis, Indiana, watching Taylor Elgersma and the Green Bay Packers against a Joe and the Indianapolis Colts. Dave Naylor, NFL on TSN, CFL on TSN, just a football guru.
Everything. Everything.
We appreciate you joining us. Talk to us. Tell us about Taylor Elgersma with the Green Bay Packers. What did you see? You were just down there. What did you see, and what are you hearing?
Well, the first thing I saw was him as the second quarterback off the bench. And I was not expecting that. You know, and in fact, after the game, I said to Taylor Elgersma, I said, like, weren't you the 4th quarterback last week? And he said, yeah, I came in with 3 minutes left. And Jordan Love didn't play in this one.
Sorry, before we go into this, Dave, give us the background on Taylor.
Yeah, sorry.
Fast.
Let's just do who is Taylor Elgersma?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last season, he was the winner of the Heck Crichton Award as the outstanding player in Canadian University football, Vanier Cup winner. And what happened is he went in the offseason. He went down to something called the College Gridiron Showcase, impressed down there. Got an invite to the Senior Bowl on sort of short notice because they had somebody pull out. He got the invite. He is the second university football player from Canada in history to get a Senior Bowl invite. I covered the first one in 1992. And a receiver out of Western, Tyrone Williams. I digress. And from what I understand, there was, I think some of the Green Bay coaching staff was involved in the Senior Bowl. Michael Falls, his head coach, told me this story. So they had a like on him, right back to January. He got a top 30 visit, when teams can bring in up to 30 players for one-on-one visits. He got a visit with Green Bay, which again was indicative of their interest. There were multiple mini camp invites after he was not taken in the draft. He accepted to Green Bay and Buffalo. And I managed to break the story of his signing because I called the Bills and said, hey, I just want to make sure I can see Taylor Elgersma when I come to your mini camp this weekend. And they said, he ain't coming. And I was like, what? So, yeah, it turned out he had agreed with Green Bay. And look, it's not one of these things where they're bringing 5 or 6 guys to camp. There's 4. And I think one of the intriguing things about this is that the guy who he's in a battle with is a guy named Sean Clifford, who is a quarterback at Penn State. He's a 5th-round pick out of 2023. He has 1 NFL pass on his resume, and he kind of got bypassed for the number 2 role last year, which when they brought in Malik Willis. So it looks like the competition is fair. The difference, and this is where I think the conversation gets really interesting, is what this kid is trying to do, okay? There's 2 things that are really remarkable. One is, first, with all due respect to OU football, U Sport football, it is, a massive leap up. I'll just let's state the facts.
Yep.
There's not a single player that Taylor Elgersma faced in 4 years of university football who is as good as anybody who was on the field Saturday at Lucas Oil. Nobody, right? And that's a preseason game.
Not even close.
Not even close.
Not even close.
Then you throw in that this is a different game. I mean, this is a guy who's played all his football in Canada. He's obviously drilled down playing serious football at the Canadian university level, but it's all the timing, the cadence, the spacing, the play. I mean, it's all three downs.
At quarterback, too. Guys make that transition occasionally, but at quarterback, too. This is
and I think like you could see some of the things that he struggled with being, the lack of reps at that place. Like I thought there were times when he faced pressure that he looked like he wasn't his awareness of the pressure wasn't always great. Obviously, the pressure's coming a lot more quickly than it was when he was in U Sport. And it wasn't like he saw complicated defenses. There were, simulated pressures and zone blitzes all over the place or anything like that. I think that's one of the things you can see. But he's got an arm. Like he absolutely has got an arm, and he's got presence and got confidence. And that's the biggest thing to me. And Matt LaFleur mentioned this after the game. He said, energy he brought to our offense, command of the huddle, which would be two big questions for a guy walking out of U Sport, right? Can you command an NFL huddle? When you go on the field, does everybody's shoulders kind of sag and the energy of the offense because they don't really believe in you? What are you doing here?
Right.
That was not the case at all.
Right.
And even when I spoke to him after the game, I'd never met him before. First of all, he's got the measurables. He looks like an NFL quarterback when you stand beside him. There's no doubt about that. But I had a bit of a
what is he? Is he
6'5", 227? Yeah. Okay. And I asked him, it's funny, I had a bit of a uh-oh moment because he comes into the game. I'm very excited. It's, about 6 minutes left in the first half. And his first drop back, he takes a sack. And I'm like, oh boy, is he out of his class? Because really, having just played 3 minutes of garbage time the other night in the earlier preseason game, he really hasn't had this opportunity. And I asked him, I said, so what goes through your head when you took a sack on your first drop back? And man, he was unfazed. He said, well, good. I took a hit. I'm into the game. It's football. That was his answer. Sometimes you need a hit. I don't think he would have answered the question any differently if I'd been asking him about week 1 in the OUA against the Waterloo Warriors last fall, as opposed to the Indianapolis Colts. So I was impressed with his composure. And again, just that he didn't look out of place. Now, the things that he didn't do great, he forced a couple of throws. One of them was intercepted, and I had a great angle on it. You could see him kind of force it into a window that wasn't there. The pick came off the board statistically because there was a face mask penalty on it. He missed a receiver along the rail on deep throw, badly, threw 7-8 yards behind him. But beyond that, and maybe say just struggling a little bit with some situations when there was pressure and the pocket started to break down. I mean, when you put it in the context of what he's trying to do and how quickly he's trying to do it, I was very impressed.
You can't emphasize enough the jump he's making from U Sports to the greatest, toughest football league in the world. That needs to be emphasized as much as possible. But you said something that's very important. It's respect, command and respect. Getting in that in that huddle and guys saying, where does this guy go to school? What? Where's this guy going to school? But the fact that he's been able to do that's impressive right there. Talk a little bit more about that, Dave, how he's been able to do that.
Let me add one thing real fast just to add to that, Milt. I noticed, and I think I might have talked to you about it, Dave, but we were watching it, and I talked to you about it now that I think about it, because we had the TVs on, we had a CFL game on, and we had TVs in the background. You remember when he ran to the sideline?
Those guys they were cheering for him.
Scrambled, he scrambled, and a linebacker came up on him, and he stiff-armed the linebacker, and then tried to truck the other guy, and we noticed that a bunch of the vet guys that weren't dressed on the sideline were jumping up on him, hitting his helmet, smacking him.
Cheering for him. Yep.
That we said right there, the guys in the locker room like him because you could tell the reaction to the sideline when those vet guys did that. They like him anyway.
He showed, again, he didn't look afraid when he had to get out a couple times and bootleg or scramble, off a situation when he was outside of structure. And you mentioned he lowered his shoulder. He used his kind of physicality. He doesn't have the athleticism of a Josh Allen, but he's built like him. When it comes time to sort of lean into it when he's being tackled. Just a story for comparison, Milt, just about the composure and the confidence to step into that level. There's a guy named Larry Justdanis, who you guys may or may not have heard of. He ran Football North in Mississauga.
Yep.
He started some games for the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the mid 90s, and he had played at Acadia. Larry is the only U Sport quarterback in history who was invited to the NFL Combine. And I didn't know this until like 2-3 years ago. Somebody told me, really? Like, how do I not know? So next time I was talking to Larry, I said, Larry, somebody told me you were invited to the NFL Combine out of Acadia. And he said, yeah, I was. And I said, how did it go? He said, horribly. He said, it was a disaster. I said, why? He said, I completely freaked out and melted down standing there with Jimmy Johnson and Marv Levy watching me throw. Right? Like he just could not get where I am and who's here and what this is. Couldn't get beyond it, and I say, we really talked about it honestly, but, and that's the other thing about, I think, with Taylor Elgersma, and this is, you could talk about the level of football, which we all are familiar with the differences, but I mean, think of what the crowds and the atmosphere of an OU football game is compared to Lucas Oil Stadium. And again, I know it's preseason, but there's 65,000 people there, so there was just nothing about the way he handled himself. I went down to the field and watched warm-ups a little bit. You just had no sense that this guy was in awe at all. And again, after the game, very much, I think one of the things when you're trying to make that leap, you can't be in awe of where you are. You can't, because that no one else is. The first round pick in the locker room isn't, right? I mean, I'm sure you have that moment the first day you walk in and they hand you a Green Bay Packer helmet and a jersey. You're going to take a little moment there and say, like last fall, the guy was, in playing for the Laurier Golden Hawks. So when you think of who his teammates were, some of them kids right out of Canadian high school football versus what he's doing now, but there was just nothing about it that made, he didn't take, they took some, it was preseason football. There were flags all over the place, but they weren't him. There weren't too much time in the huddle. They weren't delayed. You know what I mean? There was just, you didn't see his command of the offense. And this was actually something that Michael Falls, his head coach, said to me. I talked to him about a month ago and said, what does Taylor have to do to kind of make this work? And he used a word. I love this word, so I'm going to use it. He said, for him, it's all about, can he orchestrate an NFL offense? I love that verb because I think of that, and then,
this is Laurier
Michael Falls, the Laurier coach said. He said, can he orchestrate an NFL offense? And I think the answer coming out of that preseason game was yes, at least, at that level in a preseason situation on what was really, other than the 3 minutes from the previous week, his first significant opportunity. And the other thing about this is he didn't find out he was going into the game second until game day, right? So it's not like he had to be ready the moment for the day that he goes in and plays that much. And I was communicating with the beat writer for ESPN for Green Bay and asked him, I said, how much should we read into the fact that he was second quarterback off the bench into this game or into the game? And he said, I would take that to mean that they think they've already know what Sean Clifford is. And this was an opportunity to test what Taylor Elgersma can bring. And they only do that if he's in serious competition for the number 3 job.
If he has an opportunity, exactly. Yeah. If he has an opportunity to make the team.
So that's where I want to end this, because I think that's what everybody's curious to know is this guy going to make the team? And I will add that I went this morning after we talked, Dave, and I watched all of his passes from the game and the game film on that. And one thing that stood out to me is that Taylor Elgersma was not shy or afraid at all. He was getting back to, a lot of times you see young quarterbacks get in the game and they don't want to make mistakes. They're worried about making mistakes, so they hold the ball, they get sacked, and you see it so often. Yeah. I mean, you see it now with not even just young quarterbacks or rookies, but you see with backups. They come in the game and they hold the ball because they're not sure, they don't want to make mistakes. Taylor got out there and he absolutely ripped the ball, and he threw it in some tight windows. Yeah. And like he said, LaFleur said that there were some questionable throws, but what I saw is a guy he looks the part. He was getting back to his 5th step or his 3rd step, whatever the drop was, and he was letting it go. And he does not look. If I saw him, I would think he went to Alabama or LSU or the Great Oregon. He looked, or
Miami of Ohio.
He looks the part. And so he did not look out of place. Big arm, big athlete, and had a ton of confidence and swag. Now we look at the depth chart, Dave, and you said it. So it's Malik Willis. For those who don't know, it's obviously Jordan Love's the starter. Malik Willis is the backup, and then it's Sean Clifford, who's the third guy. And Dave, we talked about it earlier. It seems as though they signed Sean Clifford last year when Jordan Love got hurt, or they signed Malik
I
Willis
believe they
last
traded
year.
or signed Willis when Clifford kind of had an opportunity to be the number 2, and it didn't look like they were comfortable with that.
Out.
So he's a guy they've already, a draft pick.
So the 2 is set. The 2 is set.
Yeah, the 3 is up for grabs.
But the 3 is up.
But the guy who he's competing against is somebody they already bypassed for the number 2 last year. So there's already kind of a vote of non-confidence. And that may be putting it strongly, but they weren't confident enough to go with him as the number 2 last year. He's a 5th-round pick, thrown 1 NFL pass through 2 years. So it's not like they've run this guy out, to give him opportunities. And I think the thinking, if you're trying to convince yourself that Taylor Elgersma can make this roster, I think the thinking goes like this. They know what Sean Clifford is. They know he's probably a low-ceiling NFL quarterback. With Taylor Elgersma, the whole intrigue is, what's the high side here? What does he look like at OTAs next spring if he's on the practice roster for 20 weeks this fall? And getting conditioning and nutrition and all the coaching, the offseason that goes with an NFL team. Where does this go? And I think, the way most NFL teams manage their number 3 is they keep them on the practice roster. Occasionally they'll put him on this as the number 3 quarterback, but so he could certainly end up on the PR as the number 3. And I think that the thought is that, that you might find you'll never know what he is unless you do this. I guess that's the way to say it. But I think the first step was playing him his way into the competition, and I believe he's done that. Now has he done enough, or can he do enough? Because we got one preseason game left.
Can he do enough?
They got Seattle at Lambeau Field this week. Can he do enough, to make them say, you know what? If we had to win a game tomorrow, we're probably starting Sean Clifford. But when we looked at who we think will be the better quarterback in 2 years, we're going to go with Taylor Elgersma.
Well, as you mentioned, a lot may be determined by this last preseason game. And we know if unfortunately he doesn't make it in the NFL, we know who drafted him. The Winnipeg
They got to be
Bombers,
excited and nervous about watching this. It's the old paradox, right? Hey, he looks great. Wait a minute, he looks too good.
He looks too good.
Thanks for joining us, Dave. Appreciate your time, my man. Where do we find you, Dave?
You find me on X at TSN Dave Naylor. Of course, Sports Center and TSN.ca. Click on the NFL or CFL tab. You'll find all kinds of my content there.
You'll be on the panel with us.
I am on the panel. Yeah.
That's
right. I'm looking forward.
Hey, make sure you say,
Milt, you are my inspiration, and I would never show up for a TV appearance with anything other than a shiny head. So I will be there. And I'm looking forward to the in-stadium experience. We're going to have a decent crowd down there. We got the X atmosphere. Yeah. Maybe doing some rides or some games before the football game. This sounds like a hoot.
Sounds like Milt's having cotton candy. Bye, guys.
I see that. Take care.